Watch where you're walking with that champagne. You probably can't even pronounce it. The cruel words sliced through the elegant buzz of the exclusive Chicago steakhouse, dripping with venom from the platinum card table where a woman in designer silk adjusted her tennis bracelet with a satisfied smirk. To the wealthy elite dining in that marble palace, the young black waitress was invisible, a ghost drifting through their universe of gold leaf and aged whiskey beneath their notice. Her name was Maya Williams, but none of them bothered to learn it. She was simply the staff. Her crisp, white blouse perfectly pressed, her natural curls pulled into a professional bun. No flashy accessories, no desperate attempts at glamour, just an understated elegance that didn't beg for validation. Moments later, when four masked gunmen burst through the mahogany doors and chaos erupted across the dining room, Maya stood her ground, steady as granite. In 20 heart-stopping seconds, she neutralized two attackers and shielded a terrified teenage boy from the third. Her movements were lightning fast and surgical, betraying a Marine Corps background nobody could have imagined. The tech mogul at table 12 watched in disbelief, and the entire restaurant fell into stunned silence, their prejudices laid bare like an open wound. Maya was 28 with a face that seemed achingly familiar, like a childhood friend you'd lost touch with. Not Hollywood beautiful, not magazine perfect, just authentically striking. Her deep brown eyes had a way of cutting right through pretense, like she could decode a person's true nature without effort. She moved with intention in every gesture, controlled and confident, her hands rock-steady, even while balancing multiple wine glasses. The Sterling Room wasn't just any restaurant. It was a cathedral of wealth where crystal chandeliers sparkled like captured starlight, and the atmosphere was thick with the aroma of Wagyu beef and entitlement. The clientele were the type who didn't simply eat dinner. They orchestrated elaborate performances, their forced laughter and crystal clinking serving as symphonies of superiority. Maya didn't belong in their world. At least, that's what their dismissive glances and whispered comments suggested. Her comfortable black shoes, her absence of designer labels, her quiet dignity, it all branded her as an intruder. They had no idea she'd grown up in circles just as privileged, in a family that controlled major real estate empires, raised to value substance over spectacle. But Maya had abandoned that existence, choosing authenticity over appearances. Now she paid the price for that choice every single shift. She'd been working at the Sterling Room for 9 months, covering the evening hours where the gratuities were substantial, but the customers were merciless. Her colleagues respected her mainly because she avoided workplace politics. She'd bust tables without complaint, accept their harsh critiques silently, and never fire back regardless of how savage their attacks became. It wasn't cowardice, it was strategic. Maya had witnessed real danger, environments where one mistake meant death, not wounded pride. She'd mastered the art of choosing her confrontations, and these people with their luxury handbags and razor-sharp insults weren't worth her ammunition. But tonight, something felt different, like the universe was coiled and ready to spring. The VIP section was more obnoxious than usual, their voices drowning out the smooth saxophone drifting through the speakers. Maya navigated the dining room, her serving tray perfectly balanced, her expression neutral, but her awareness missed absolutely nothing. The woman who'd made the champagne comment was Victoria Sterling, early 40s, with platinum blonde hair styled to perfection and an emerald necklace that probably cost more than most people's cars. She was a pharmaceutical heiress, the type who discussed charity galas like military campaigns. Her husband Marcus sat across from her, mid-50s with distinguished silver temples and a Patek Philippe that caught every reflection. He ran a private equity empire and spoke about market manipulation like it was an art form. Next to them sat their associates. Trevor, a hedge fund prince with an artificially bronzed complexion that screamed expensive vacations, and his companion Sophia, whose platinum extensions and sapphire jewelry announced new money desperately trying to appear old. They represented the absolute worst type of dining party, loud, self-important, and hungry to diminish someone else. Maya had become their evening's entertainment. As Maya approached carrying a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon, Victoria raised her flute, examining it like a forensic scientist. "There's a water spot here," she declared, indicating a non-existent flaw. "I suppose attention to detail isn't something they emphasize wherever you learn to serve." The table erupted in laughter, Sophia's cackle rising above the rest. Maya paused, her fingers grazing the bottle's label, then placed it down with barely a sound. "I'll bring you a fresh glass immediately," she responded, her voice level, her composure unshaken. She pivoted to leave, but not before Trevor leaned toward Marcus, speaking loud enough for Maya to catch every syllable. "Zero class whatsoever. I'd bet money she's never set foot in a place this caliber, except maybe to mop the bathrooms." Maya's posture remained perfect, her pace unchanged, but her grip on the serving tray tightened just enough to show a flash of tension. The general manager, Paul, was equally problematic. A nervous man with perpetually damp palms and a habit of practically groveling before high-roller customers. He intercepted Maya near the kitchen entrance, his tone hushed but aggressive. "Stay away from the tech executive's table. We can't have you stumbling around him." He gestured toward the corner booth where David Chun sat, with his 16-year-old son Kevin. Chun was 42, lean and sharp-eyed with understated but clearly expensive clothing. His presence commanded attention effortlessly. People noticed him without understanding why. Kevin was visiting from boarding school, looking uncomfortable in his blazer, constantly checking his phone and clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Chun scrolled through emails, mostly ignoring the restaurant's atmosphere, but Maya caught him glancing her direction once. She acknowledged Paul with a curt nod, her expression flat. Understood. She didn't argue or elaborate. She simply continued working. Before disaster struck, there was a brief moment, small but weighted with significance. Maya was refilling water glasses at the bar when she hesitated, her eyes lingering on a small photograph tucked inside her apron. The image was faded, showing a younger Maya in desert camouflage alongside her unit in some Middle Eastern outpost. Carlos, the bartender, noticed her staring. "Family photo?" he asked while polishing stemware. Maya slid the picture back into hiding, her face revealing nothing. "Something like that," she murmured, then returned to her duties. Carlos didn't press further. Nobody ever did. Maya wasn't the type to encourage personal questions, and most staff members didn't care enough to probe. But not everyone overlooked her completely. Brittany, a hostess in her early 20s with a sharp tongue and a tendency to fawn over wealthy guests, cornered Maya by the bar later. She was fidgeting with her hair, her eyes gleaming with malicious intent. "You know, Maya, you should really smile more often. You're killing the whole atmosphere here. Nobody wants some depressing waitress serving their $1,000 dinner." Brittany's voice carried far enough to attract attention from neighboring tables. Maya set down her water pitcher, her movements slow and deliberate. "I'm here to work professionally, not put on a performance," she stated, her tone calm but unwavering. Brittany smirked, undeterred by the response. "Well, maybe if you actually made an effort, you wouldn't look like you just wandered in from some homeless camp." A couple at a nearby table chuckled quietly, and Maya's hand briefly tightened on the pitcher before she walked away. "Real quick, while this story's building, grab your phone and hit that like button, then drop a comment below. Maybe share about a time when someone completely misjudged you or made you feel invisible. It helps keep this channel going, sharing stories like Maya's for people who understand that feeling. And please subscribe. It's small, but it means we can keep telling these powerful moments. All right, back to what happened next. The evening was flowing along, the restaurant humming with its typical mixture of arrogance and alcohol when the front entrance exploded inward. For men in dark balaclavas charged inside, their heavy boots echoing on marble floors, automatic weapons held high. "Everyone on the ground now," the leader commanded, his voice gravelly from years of chain smoking. Pandemonium erupted instantly. Crystals shattered as patrons dove beneath tables, their designer outfits dragging through spilled wine and scattered appetizers. Victoria Sterling yanked Marcus down, her emerald necklace tangling in the tablecloth and ripping it. She released a piercing scream, clutching her Hermes bag like a shield. Trevor was already kneeling, muttering frantically, "Take everything, just don't hurt anyone." Sophia's sobs pierced the air, her carefully applied makeup streaming down her cheeks. David Chun froze completely, his face draining of color as he fumbled to remove his wedding ring and Rolex, preparing to surrender them. But 16-year-old Kevin Chun wasn't fast enough. He stood paralyzed by the booth, his phone still in his trembling hands, eyes wide with terror. Maya was crossing the center of the dining room, carrying empty dessert plates. She didn't drop them or scream. She simply stood there, her gaze rapidly assessing the four gunmen like she was calculating tactical positions. The leader, a stocky man with a jagged scar bisecting his left eyebrow, spotted Kevin immediately. "Kid's got expensive taste," he snarled, advancing on the teenager with his weapon trained on Kevin's chest. "Empty your pockets, rich boy." Kevin stumbled backward against the booth, his voice cracking as he stammered. I don't have anything." The leader grabbed Kevin's blazer, pressing the gun barrel against the boy's temple. "Lying to me, prep school?" David Chun started to rise from his table. "Please, that's my son. Take whatever you want from me instead." But another gunman immediately swung his rifle toward Chun, shouting, "Sit down, or I'll blow your head off." Chun dropped back into his seat, helpless, watching his son face execution. Maya moved like lightning. In one fluid motion, she hurled the dessert plates at the leader's head, the porcelain exploding against his skull and sending him staggering. Before he could recover, she dove forward, wrapping her arms around Kevin and pulling him to the floor behind the booth just as the gunman's weapon discharged into the ceiling. "Stay down and don't move," she whispered to the terrified teenager. The other three gunmen spun toward Maya, but she was already in motion. She vaulted over the booth's back, using Kevin's weight to propel herself, and landed a devastating kick to the second attacker's knee. He crumpled with a howl of agony. The third gunman fired wildly, but Maya was a ghost, rolling behind overturned tables and using the chaos to her advantage. The leader, blood streaming from his forehead, roared in fury and charged at Maya. She waited until he was almost on top of her, then pivoted and drove her elbow into his solar plexus. As he doubled over gasping, she grabbed his weapon and smashed the stock across his jaw. He hit the marble floor like dead weight. The fourth gunman, seeing his partners down, tried to flee toward the kitchen. Maya pursued him, tackling him from behind and using a sleeper hold she'd perfected in the Marines. He went limp in her arms within seconds. 20 seconds. For armed men neutralized. One terrified teenager saved. Maya stood in the center of the destroyed dining room, breathing normally, her server's uniform barely wrinkled. She looked down at Kevin, who was still curled in a protective ball behind the booth. "You're safe now," she said gently, extending her hand to help him up. The guests began emerging from their hiding places, their faces pale with shock. But instead of gratitude, Maya heard whispers of suspicion and resentment. A woman in a beaded gown pointed an accusing finger at Maya. "She's too calm. Normal people don't fight like that." Maybe she was working with them all along. Her husband nodded vigorously. "Exactly. This whole thing feels staged." Victoria Sterling, her perfect hair now disheveled, stood up and brushed off her silk dress. "I don't trust her," she announced loudly. "Real waitresses don't know combat techniques. She's hiding something dangerous." Trevor, his bronze tan now pale with fear, added, "She's probably some kind of criminal herself. We should call security on her too." Paul, the general manager, was practically hyperventilating. "Maya, what the hell was that performance? You've put this entire establishment at legal risk." His voice shook with panic and accusation. "You could have gotten everyone killed with your heroics." Maya didn't respond to any of them. She simply knelt beside Kevin, checking him for injuries. "Are you hurt anywhere?" she asked softly. The teenager shook his head, his eyes still wide with trauma, but filled with something like awe as he looked at her. David Chin finally reached his son, pulling Kevin into a fierce embrace while staring at Maya over the boy's shoulder. The police arrived within minutes, their radios crackling, their boots heavy on the debris-strewn floor. They handcuffed the unconscious gunman and began taking statements from witnesses. But the murmurs of doubt about Maya persisted throughout the restaurant. A detective with weathered features and graying hair stopped dead when he saw Maya. He lowered his radio, recognition dawning across his face. "Holy shit. Gunnery Sergeant Maya Williams. I thought you disappeared after discharge." The entire restaurant went silent, every head turning to stare. Maya nodded once, her voice quiet but clear. "I wanted a civilian life." The detective shook his head in amazement. "Marine Corps Force Recon. Counterterrorism Specialist. You saved my unit's ass in Fallujah back in 19. The guest's expressions shifted dramatically. Victoria's mouth fell open. Marcus looked at the floor. Trevor suddenly found his phone very interesting. Sophia stopped crying and started fidgeting nervously with her jewelry. Maya didn't elaborate or boast. She didn't need to say anything else. As the police finished processing the scene, David Chun approached Maya slowly. Kevin stayed close to his father's side, still shaken but clearly grateful. "I need to speak with you," Chun said quietly. Maya looked at him, her expression unreadable but attentive. "My son would be dead if you hadn't acted. Those people," he gestured toward the other guests, "they would have watched it happen and done nothing." Kevin stepped forward, his voice still trembling but determined. "She saved my life, Dad. She could have been killed protecting me, and she didn't even hesitate." Chun nodded, his decision already made. "From today forward, you're my head of corporate security. Whatever salary you want, whatever resources you need. You've proven what real courage looks like." A shocked murmur rippled through the restaurant. Victoria's champagne glass slipped from her fingers. Marcus's face turned red with embarrassment. Trevor stared in disbelief. But Maya heard other voices too. Carlos, the bartender, who had always treated her with respect, stepped out from behind the bar. "I saw everything," he announced to the room. "She risked her life for a kid she didn't even know. That's a hero." A few of the younger staff members nodded in agreement, though most of the wealthy patrons looked away in shame. The next morning brought a tsunami of headlines. Tech billionaire hires waitress as security chief after she saves his son. The story exploded across social media, with security footage from the Sterling Room going viral. Maya's lightning-fast takedown was replayed millions of times, her composed face contrasting sharply with the panic surrounding her. The comment sections were brutal for the guests who had mocked her. Victoria Sterling's pharmaceutical company faced immediate backlash when someone posted the champagne pronunciation video online. "This woman insulted the hero who would later save a child's life," the caption read, along with a slow-motion clip of Victoria's sneering face. Her company's stock price plummeted as consumers organized boycotts. Marcus's private equity firm issued desperate damage control statements, but investors were already jumping ship. Trevor's hedge fund collapsed within a week when a financial blogger with millions of followers tweeted, "Hedge fund bro mocked Marine veteran who saved teenager's life. Is this your money manager?" His biggest clients pulled their investments, leaving his firm in ruins. Sophia's luxury lifestyle Instagram account was flooded with angry comments until she finally deleted it entirely. A month later, Maya walked into a gleaming conference room on the 40th floor of Chin Industries. The executives, all in perfectly tailored suits, rose respectfully as she entered. One of them, a man who had been at the Sterling Room that night and laughed at Victoria's cruel comments, now stood to pull out her chair. "Ms. Williams," he said, his voice carefully respectful. "It's an honor to have you leading our security division." Maya nodded and took her seat without ceremony. On her new desk sat that same creased photograph, now in an elegant frame. She didn't mention her military service or that night at the restaurant. She didn't need to. The room's deference spoke volumes, but her steady confidence remained exactly the same. During her first security briefing, a young intern who had been working at the restaurant that evening approached Maya afterward. "I was there," the intern said quietly, her hands trembling slightly. "I saw how they treated you before everything happened. I'm sorry I didn't speak up." Maya studied the young woman's face, then nodded once. "It's finished," she replied, her tone gentle but final. The intern hesitated, then placed a handwritten thank you note on Maya's desk. Maya tucked it into her jacket pocket next to the old photograph and moved on. But something fundamental had changed. The way Maya carried herself through rooms now, the way her eyes automatically scanned for threats and exits. It wasn't invisible anymore. People noticed and showed respect. In meetings, her recommendations carried immediate weight. When David Chun entered a room and gave her a respectful nod, all other conversations stopped. She wasn't just the woman who had taken down four gunmen. She was the woman who had transformed an entire room's perspective without speaking a word. Her silence was no longer seen as weakness. It had become undeniable strength. Years earlier, Maya had walked away from that life of medals and commendations, missions she'd never discuss, trauma she refused to carry. She'd chosen a small apartment, a quiet job, an existence where she didn't need to be anyone's savior. But that night at the Sterling Room, when the doors burst open and guns appeared, choice wasn't an option. It wasn't about proving herself to anyone. It was simply who she had always been. Now, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her corner office, the city sprawling endlessly below, she didn't feel victorious. She just felt authentic, steady and certain, exactly as she'd always been. One afternoon, leaving the office building, a homeless veteran outside recognized her military bearing and offered a small wooden cross he'd carved. "For luck, sister," he said with a gap-toothed smile. The moment transported her instantly. Another marketplace, another continent, a child offering candy with the same hopeful expression. She accepted the cross, her fingers tracing its rough edges, and gave him a $20 bill. "Keep fighting," she said softly. The veteran saluted respectfully, unaware of the profound significance of that simple exchange. Maya slipped the wooden cross into her pocket alongside the photograph and the note, then continued walking with measured steps and focused eyes. For everyone watching who's ever been underestimated, who's ever been told you don't matter, who's ever been invisible in a room full of people who think they're better than you, this story belongs to you. You understand what it means to stand tall when the world wants you to disappear. You're not wrong for refusing to shrink. You're not alone in this fight. You've carried the weight of their judgment, and you're still here, still standing. Where are you watching this from? Drop a comment below and hit that follow button to join me as we explore more stories of courage, injustice, and ultimately triumph.